So we're going to have presentations from Daniel Wan from Alchemy VR / Atlantic Pictures, and from Katie Grayson from Passion Pictures, who are both doing projects that move in this space from companies that were rooted in more traditional forms of moving image. So Dan, if you want to, there you are, good. You want to make yourself way up here? No, up here, that's fine. And then as each person presents, and then we're going to have Ben Roberts from the BFI to talk about how the BFI sees this world. And then when you finish, we all sit down there. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Dan, and I'm lead creative at Alchemy VR, as described. There you go. I never quite know how to describe Alchemy, but the best way to sum us up is we're a factual / educational / documentary VR and AR content studio. Some might even describe us as an edutainment company. Not entirely sure how I feel about edutainment as a term, but Alchemy spawned from a successful TV production company called Atlantic Productions, which are probably best known for their work with David Attenborough, and as a warning, features quite heavily in the next 5 minutes. What I'm going to do is, in this presentation, is run you through sort of our journey from flat screen TV to state-of-the-art VR. So as a company, we're always looking for new ways to tell the story, whether that's through innovative filming technology or, an entirely new medium. Back in 2010, we started exploring the capabilities of 3D, setting up our 3D production studio, Colossus. This was our first step on the road to VR. Collaborating with Sky TV, we produced 5 3D films featuring Sir David, and the one pictured on your right, Natural History Museum Alive, won the BAFTA 4 years ago in the Best Specialist Factual category. So 2015, which is an age in the immersive tech landscape, is when our move into sort of virtual reality started in earnest. We were actually filming a TV flat screen series for the BBC, David Attenborough's Great Barrier Reef. This series took Sir David to his favourite place in the world, the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. But during the production process, we realised something. The mini submersible that Sir David and our crew were diving down below the waves was perfect for 360-degree filming. As you can see in this photo, which is one of my absolute favourite shots from the series, the sub is essentially a see-through sphere of glass, allowing you to see everything around you, much like you can do in VR. So that moment sort of inspiration halfway through the production process of the TV series became this, which is a VR experience that allowed you to sit alongside Sir David in the sub as you dive beneath the waves. I mean, what could be better than a one-on-one tour of the Great Barrier Reef with the greatest naturalist of our time? Oh, formatting issues. Anyway, the experience was exhibited in museums across the globe, and this is what the Australian broadcaster ABC said about it after they previewed it at the Australian Museum at Sydney. Virtual reality has the potential to transform the way we experience and think about the natural environment. It's also exhibited at the National Museum in Canberra, the Natural History Museum in London, the Trondheim Science Centre in Norway, and even at Glastonbury Festival in the UK. It's imminently launching on Sony, PSVR and the Oculus platforms alongside our other experiences. And incredibly, it became the first ever virtual reality film to be awarded the first ever BAFTA. First ever virtual reality film to be awarded the BAFTA award, shall I say. Next, I'm going to talk about one of our other experiences which utilised state-of-the-art technology to immerse audiences even deeper. We were commissioned by Greenpeace to produce Munduruku, the fight to defend to the heart of the Amazon. The Munduruku are the indigenous people who live on the Tapajós Basin in the Amazon rainforest. The Brazilian government, however, had plans to build a series of megadams on their land, in which they had no legal rights to, despite living there for hundreds of years. So part of a wider Greenpeace Park campaign, the VR was used as a tool to elicit empathy with the global population and highlight the plight of the Munduruku people. It's actually a multi-sensory experience, played out in a large pod you step into, made in collaboration with a multi-sensory company called the Feelies. Here is a picture of the pod in the press tent at Glastonbury. Essentially what we produced, heat, humidity, smells and wind effect elements whilst you watched the experience in VR. All to provide that extra level of immersion and make audiences feel like they were really in the Amazon rainforest living amongst the Munduruku. Here's what the inside of the pod looks like in a sort of equi-rectangular shot. You sit in that chair, you put on the headset, then heat lamps, scent containers, wind simulators, humidifiers, and a vibrating sub-pack go to work, automatically sync to what you're seeing in VR. You're even given various objects to hold during specific scenes, and there's one incredible scene where you're given a hot coffee mug as you sit down for breakfast with the Munduruku tribe, and they're brewing coffee on an open fire pit. You know, it's absolutely an incredible scene. The pod toured Brazil and Latin America, as well as the UK Film Festival circuit. And we actually showed this to someone at South by Southwest, and this person came out crying. It was absolutely mind-blowing. So VR has so often been called an empathy engine, and you've probably heard that term a million times, but this is what triggered Greenpeace to think about how could they send their messages through more immersive experiences, to elicit empathy in public audiences. It has that capability to elicit emotional empathy with characters and content on a far greater level than flat-screen film. And sort of research conducted by the Stanford University has proven this, as you can see by these little excerpts there. And basically what they're saying is, you know, the more the immersive an experience, the more empathy the viewer feels, and the greater tendency they may have towards pro-environmental behaviours, which was clearly perfect for Greenpeace's purposes. And most importantly, you know, it looked like we did get into people's minds and hearts through the campaign, through the VR experience. The Brazilian government, just a few months ago, or beginning of this year rather, announced an end to their policy of building dams in the area. And although we'd like to, we can't take all the credit for this incredible victory, but, you know, we'd like to think the multi-sensory VR experience certainly helped achieve this. And that is truly the power of immersive technology. So that's kind of been our journey over, I guess, since 2010 to about 2017. And of course, we have lots and lots of new projects bubbling under in 2018 that hopefully we can talk about soon. But I guess the most relevant question to all of us here is ultimately, what's next? Thank you for listening. And if you have any specific questions, do contact me. Cheers.
Hi, my name's Katie. I work at Passion Pictures. I'm head of experience, which sounds a little bit Jimi Hendrix, but it's our new division focusing on all things experiential. Passion's been around for 30 years. We're an Oscar-winning film production company, but I sit within the animation studio. I guess what Passion is known for is this emotive, character-based storytelling, whether that's commercial projects. Justino Lotteria, the most awarded piece of commercial animated content ever, which is pretty good. Big kind of Pixar level CG for Nike, the last World Cup. Also self-funded short films like Pear Cider and Cigarettes, which was Oscar nominated. And a lot of IP extension work for things like Marvel, Disney, as Rocket and Groot. We've got a few more of those in the pipeline as well. What Passion Experience moves us to is what at the moment we're calling technology-enabled storytelling, which is where we can use tech and interactive tech, new immersive technologies to tell stories in different ways. So last year we released Gorillas, Saturn's Barns, on Google Spotlight Stories, sort of the next stage of our sort of very long relationship with Gorillas and everything, every format they've played around with. We did for Nike, this is our real-time mocap CG pipeline, so we can take live actors, get them into CG quality characters. I think Zlatan at the last World Cup, we did 100 minutes of CG across 25 days, all responsive, real-time, coming out between ad breaks, Twitter Hangouts. We could make live comments on matches. So that tech is something we've just kind of upgraded. We've got that working now. You'll see it working a lot for Gorillas, for Alexander the Meerkat, to enable this sort of live responsive technology. And now we're moving, more into VR, quite often driven by our directing talent. So Kieran Constantine, who do Rolling Wild, experimented with a little VR piece for Christmas last year of this Rolling Wild nativity. We've now got some R&D money internally to develop some of their own IP into sort of virtual, more apt for them mixed reality technologies. And we're using it to tell stories as well. So, to actually for that production pipeline as well. So this bottom square is Salon Alpine, is a clip from their Quill-based previs. So we've got a lot more artists, new talent coming in who are kind of natively using immersive tech as part of the production pipeline. I'd say what's next for us is moving from this idea of technology-enabled storytelling to looking for the stories we can only tell with new technology. So rather than it being just, here's an IP, let's make a VR extension, what's special about VR that we can only tell that story in this way, looking at kind of where the user experience dictates that narrative. So that's a bit about what we're doing. I'm going to sit down and let someone else carry on.
Hi everyone, my name's Ben Roberts. I look after the Film Fund at the BFI. The Film Fund is a lottery fund. We support filmmakers through filmmaking, through talent development, production and distribution. I'm going to take a step back to 1984, I think. This is a shot from The Never-Ending Story. And it's a phrase, a deliberately nonsensical phrase that we use to describe where I'd say the independent filmmaker head is currently at in terms of grappling with new form. I.e., no one's really got a clue. We have a strategy called BFI 2022. It's a 5-year strategy, and something I just want to sort of talk you through today is what we're doing with our own sort of funding as we look at the future. We have changed our approach to film, narrative film, quite significantly in this strategy. Why? Because we're very conscious that we really need to grow the audience for independent film. We need to expand our talent reach in terms of who we are working with. We need to keep pace with change. There is absolutely a kind of a hardcore traditional element of independent filmmaking in the UK, and we need to nudge it forward, which means staying relevant, and as the lead body for film we need to take the lead. I think film has always been a very exploratory space ever since the Lumiere brothers pointed a train at an audience about 100 years ago and terrified them all. Film has been wowing audiences and coming up with new ways to wow them. Like all great artists, filmmakers sort of itch at being innovative, and there is plenty of examples of innovation in filmmaking over the last 100 years, and technology is now at a point where I would say the technology is ahead of where most practitioners in narrative filmmaking are. Narrative filmmaking is still largely passive, and it's still largely proscenium, despite the size of the screens getting bigger, getting smaller, 3D coming and going in fashion. But the time is now for filmmakers to really engage with the technology that is at our disposal. The big problem for us is that and an opportunity for us is that there's a critical lack of funding in interactive and immersive space, particularly in an area of writing. And I think that's somewhere I would like us to focus, because we work in storytelling, we work in a lot of scripted work. So how do you embrace technology and the challenges of immersive and interactive technologies for written work, and how are we developing writers who can write into an immersive and an interactive space, which is a little bit different to documentary work or other kind of experiential environments. But our job is to fund, so for us it's critical that we are adapting our funding, because funding and commissions from non-theatrical platforms for independent producers are very scarce indeed. Public funding is pretty much the only place where you can get development funding in the UK for filmmaking at the moment. Just in terms of what we mean by new forms, because we have quite a broad, we're taking quite a sort of broad approach to this, some of it more relevant to this discussion than others. Installation pieces, probably very difficult for us as the BFI to fund. This is the Band of Normal Devices Marshmallow Laser Feast piece, which is an installation piece. We share kind of our moving image funding remit with the Arts Council. So any work that is gallery-based or installation-based moving image work tends to be funded by the Arts Council and not by the BFI. What we are very interested in is broad access to work. So there is an issue here around distribution as well, and how funded work can reach a broad distribution base. This is a grab from On Blindness, which is Archer's Mark's exemplary companion piece to a film that we did support called Notes on Blindness. It's probably kind of closest to the kind of empathy engine work, and this is not a piece that we funded, but we are now in a position where we could probably fund a piece like this. This is Inarritu's VR piece that played in Cannes last year, and I'd say, to Andrew's point about the sort of Sex Pistols gig, remains somewhat sort of out of reach. This is a problem for us in terms of access. In the interactive space, this is a screen grab from an interactive movie game called Her Story, which I would say, I think was kind of produced in 2014, and I don't think the sort of interactive sort of film experience, that's film, is it game, has moved on very far since 2014. For us, just as a provocation, I also just want to mention where we are at in terms of expanding our form, and that's around length of work, because experiential immersive pieces are quite short. We're actually looking at breaking down the restrictions that we have on work that we can fund, both in terms of making it shorter, because at the moment, unless it's a talent development piece, we can only fund a feature-length piece that's roughly between sort of 85 and 120 minutes long. We want to be able to support some work that is shorter and more in the sort of immersive space. We're also very interested in supporting work which is much longer. So these are linear, two-dimensional, very sort of straightforward pieces of episodic work. This is Making a Murderer, Netflix is Making a Murderer, but we're very interested in length of work, but it's been a challenge for us in terms of how we fund. The OJ doc, which is an 8-hour film broken down into sections, is something that we would love to be able to fund, and we'd love to be able to fund work like this, which is not two-dimensional. And then I use a still just to infuriate some of my film colleagues from Twin Peaks, because we are also looking at how we break down the definition between film and television, and by extension games, because we are a film fund. The Royal Charter that the BFI works to actually covers film, television and the moving image, so by extension games, but at the moment we are not a funder of games. So this is an area that we're really having to look at when we hit a sort of interactivity space, because we have started to experience or encounter projects which could possibly qualify for the games tax relief, they could possibly qualify for the film tax relief, they could possibly qualify for the high-end television tax relief. And we're in a new world and we're having to bring ourselves up to speed. So in terms of what we're doing in the immediate year, we are de-restricting our development and production guidelines for funding so that film can mean more than just a theatrical feature-length film. We have a partner in documentary, which is Doc Society, who, if you're in the documentary space, you should get to know, because they now handle all our documentary funding through to BFI 2022. We do talent development work through a programme called BFI Network, which is intended to pull talented filmmakers in from across multiple disciplines. And then we're currently in design on a couple of specific areas of intervention in this space. One is a fund that will look at the development of 5 to 8 projects a year, technology-led projects, and over the next year or two, a residency programme that will bring filmmakers, artists and technologists together to collaborate on new ideas and maybe create some new, as yet unseen IP. So please do come and find me in the Mixer event in a short while. Thanks.
Great. So we're just going to pick apart some of those things and perhaps let me ask you some questions. Dan, campaigning. Everybody said storytelling. Talent development seems central to what we're doing. So add all those together with scalability and funding and technology. What's the biggest challenge to doing something like we're asking people to pitch in for here? Anybody can have a go at this. Katie, look like you're going to say something.
I think it's just, what we were talking about earlier and what I touched on at the end of my very short presentation, is that I think the step change for us is we've seen these experiences built off, especially with the IP thing. We've built VR experiences off the back of films and TV series, and those have existed in IMAXs or downloadable. But I think to move it forward, you're thinking about, I think it's stories that can only be told in VR. That's the value for the audience. Yep. And actually wrangling an existing IP to see how you change it, how you change that story to be told is where the challenge for me is. If it was brand new IP, I think you could invent something that works very well. And I think the studios in America, our animation equivalents in America, Penrose and Baobab, are doing that with new IP. Doing that with existing IP, I think, is a challenge.
Okay, that's interesting. Anybody else? Same thing, or?
Yeah, I think for us, it's getting the user base. The audiences. There's a lot of excitement about VR right now, of course, but that isn't necessarily reflected in sales figures for sort of home-based entertainment, at least. So it's really finding that sort of sustainable model where it does go beyond just sort of a one-off thing that people go to and forget about for the rest of their lives. It's really making sure that people are familiar enough with VR, that they are using it beyond just going somewhere and doing it once.
I just wanted to add, I'm very interested in the kind of language that could be created as a result of a project like this, sort of filmmaking language, because speaking for sort of film and TV, there's a developed language that has been kind of refined and played with over the last 100 years, and we all understand that, and we understand what it means when a cut is made, and we understand what it means when a shot is put in front of us, or a director or a writer is choosing to tell us something and choosing to withhold something. And the exciting thing for me about immersing an audience into a story is that actually that language doesn't work anymore. And that's where the sort of specificity of the technology becomes really important, because cuts are challenging. Withholding information is challenging. Presenting it when you want to present it is challenging. So I think presenting sort of ideas around sort of language is exciting.
So is that somewhere where actually as things move forward, we might be looking at different non-immersive technologies contributing to this kind of thing. So I often think sometimes in a VR piece you do seem to be just wandering around trying to find out what's going on. And I think for narrative-led pieces, does that mean we're going to be looking at, I mean, Casey, you talked about characters central to Passion's business, characters that can react to you. So are we talking about AI, machine learning, those kind of things to make this work?
Yeah, not just that though. I think it's the technology behind that performance to make a character be believable in the same space as you're in. We were talking a lot about how, I mean, you can see from our commercial work, Pixar, the language of Pixar, what we understand from Pixar has dictated so much of what we do because it's what we get as commercial briefs. And people expect a certain thing and a certain level of performance from a character. That, I think, that only works really on a flat, I think it only works on a flat screen. How do you get, not just the reaction and the AI and what's behind it to be believed, but it's that believability and performance in real time with a narrative, with a script, with your action. There's a whole load of challenges to unpick there.
Yeah, I think what you said was right. There's so much we can learn from non-immersive, non-digital kind of disciplines. The number of sort of theatre directors, or even immersive theatre directors that I've begun to speak to. I was having a discussion the other day that, when you're designing that virtual space, that interactive virtual space, actually, in terms of the UX design of that space, you can pick a lot of things out from interior design and architecture, so you're absolutely right.
Well, I guess this is why when we started off this programme, we started talking a lot to Alex McDowell. It is about world building, and then it's about creating worlds in which you can tell stories, rather than creating worlds based on the story. I suppose you've taken it to the nth degree with using perfumery as well.
Yes.
Although it's got a tradition in cinema. I mean, I do wonder whether space, telling stories in space, as you say in theatre, becomes a part of this as well. That you have to create stories that aren't just sold in time, as we've done traditionally.
Well, what the hell does that mean?
Well, so Dan's saying, so theatre directors actually find this medium quite interesting to work in, and quite easy to understand because they're used to telling stories in space, but not necessarily in lots of different places, or not necessarily sliced into different time periods.
Oh right, you don't mean in space?
No,
okay.
There's lots of VR in space pieces.
We've done several, but it's also, I guess, about where of course, in VR, the user, the viewer chooses where to look. Just like you're saying, it's not the case in film. So, in terms of directing viewers' attention, how theatre directors do that when they want the audience to be looking over there, when actually something's happened behind them, and then they do, they switch that. It's using those kind of techniques and those skill sets. Bringing those in.
I think there's something about. The isolated experience versus the communal experience as well, and where the sort of space feeds into that, because something we sort of wrestle with all the time is the fact that we're here in the cinema at the BFI, people like kind of coming and having a kind of communal experience, but also increasingly everyone is watching stuff at home on their own, so are there opportunities in sort of immersive environments to kind of bring people back together again, even if they're sort of experiencing something on their own. I'm really interested in that. I think that we're also really interested in how new work that emerges is the central experience rather than one of the kind of ancillary or adjacent experiences. So this is the kind of core. This is the core experience that audiences are kind of coming to at the same time, which I know is sort of one of the kind of key sort of challenges.
So it's an absolutely key challenge. I think in this is how we do that, and how you build a business on the back of those experiences. So I don't know for each of you where you think that that this audience is going to find themselves in the future. Is it in communal experiences like this? Is it in individual, very intense pod experiences? Is it in mixed reality experiences where you can imagine lots of people embracing this?
I think right now, my feeling is that, like I said before, not everyone has a VR headset at home. So people
They may never have.
Well, they may never have, and I sort of, well, that's a whole nother argument. But I think people are at the moment, as things like the Void show and a lot of the museum stuff we've done, is that location-based experiences can make some revenue. Perhaps not as much as we'd all love and wish, but people are willing to put their hands in their pocket to experience something great. And again, it goes back to what you're saying about VR needing to be a social experience for it to be sustainable as a technology and an entertainment medium. And I think a lot of location-based VR experiences out there do create that kind of socialness around it. The Void speaks for itself. You join your friends in this amazing Star Wars world. But even the more simpler ones, like one we have at the Science Museum at the moment, the Space Descent. Although
so
you are
just so anybody hasn't seen it, so this Tim, you are in an experience as Tim Peake coming back down from the International Space Station in the Soyuz capsule.
Yeah. That sums it up quite well. But, that is very much quite isolating. There's no way around that. But, I think the way we're trying to design our sort of more location-based experiences in the future is that it is a kind of end-to-end experience. So it isn't just buy your ticket, put the headset on and get out. It's buy your ticket, there's sort of geteway, there's an entrance which is immediately immersive, but also on the other end, when you've taken your headset off, maybe there's a sort of communal space, maybe there's a bar, a cafe or whatever, something where people can, compare and contrast what they've just seen, talk to their friends, be excited, create those kind of, relive those memories that they've just had in the headset, So
the choreography of the experience is
exactly, yeah.
Katie, you obviously, with the background that Passion has, but also in your practice at the moment, you were talking about them in your presentation. It's very important to you using these technologies in the production process. And actually you seem to be getting to the point now where you've got people where that's kind of fully circular.
A lot of this is driven by our directors. We are quite a traditional production company in terms of we have director representation. And when I started, I knew we had a few directors who'd either finished projects or had ones in the work or were playing around with this medium, but I'm seeing, actually I was unaware of quite how many there were, let's say, even if they were starting to use Quill as a previous tool, which is brilliant at, the more time they spent in Quill, the more time they were starting thinking in a 360 3D space. So that's really great to see. What we're seeing from maybe people now coming out of animation school that were previously only sort of traditional animators is they have got some real-time experience. They are playing around. They are sending me their AR ideas and saying what can we do with this? Where can we take this next? Which is just so a lot of this is for us is talent-led.
So this would be one again for anybody is. For us, I mean, for me, this whole experience is quite weird because it's not like commissioning, it's not like procuring. We're trying to kind of incite kind of these big creative projects. How do we make sure that we've got the right talent in the room? So in a way, we've got to make sure that we've got to get out to the right talent. What do we need to do that?
Related to that, I'm quite interested in bringing some of this. Seeing some work that comes a bit more back down to earth as well, and perhaps has some youth in it and some sort of social impact and relevance and sort of urgency to it. And because I think a lot of this sort of technology-heavy work is expensive, and it has been in the hands of people with lots of money. And this is a lot of money for someone to sort of play with. And I think that there is more than kind of fantasy and fiction, science fiction, or even sort of globe-trotting to be done, which is sort of looking at how this can be applied to storytelling that's much more immediately on sort of everyone's doorstep. And I'd say we struggle to engage with talent that is non-traditional and under 40, and there is talent there who I think just have a sort of different intuition to how they sort of are already experiencing stories, what isn't their normal, which is perhaps not what we do, which is sort of staring at a screen without second screening and interacting. You know, how do you turn people who are very used to second screening and third screening into a real attribute rather than an annoyance, which it's sort of been in the kind of cathedral environment of a cinema. So I think
I wouldn't fancy getting my phone out in a BFI screening.
All right, well, yeah, it's close to the bone, as you say. I think talent that is intuitively connecting to an audience that is used to interactivity would probably be on the right track.
Okay. I mean, it seems, Katie, it's quite interesting that you are seeing that already in people coming into the business who've got these skills already, which is, I hadn't.
And I think established certainly with some of our more established animation directors. I was having a conversation the other day. It was, they got into animation because you can build worlds, because you can make things that, anything you want happen. And why, unfortunately the day job requires them building a storyboard that, TV ad wants them to build. But everyone in our building is always creating and sketching and thinking of things, and they happen, some of those things happen to work really well in new technology, so we will encourage them. But I think it's definitely, if you're working in films, games, animation, all of this space lends, you're kind of naturally lended to want to have, to create something and have some kind of godlike control over that. It's a little bit of a, we bring that to life.
Yeah. No, it reminds me, many years ago, I had a very young graphics person start work with me, and the first day I asked him, what did you want to do in life? And he said, I want to make a feature film inside my PC, in a world that I can live in. And that was Gareth Edwards, who went on obviously to do Rogue One. That sensibility has been around within, I think, GFX-led people for a long time. Just one last question, which is not necessarily something you want to do yourself or want to do through this, but if we only fund one of these demonstrators, what would you want it to? One problem would you like it to solve or explore that you've got at the moment?
Well, I think for the BFI, I think it has to be a compellingly different experience to the one that a sort of traditional BFI audience loves, and I think bewitching the traditionalist would be a real result.
Okay. Right, I'm not sure how we're going to write that in a scope document, but that's a real challenge. Dan?
I think for us, I guess it's one of the challenges that we're facing and playing around with at the moment, but it is sort of storytelling in mixed reality, whatever mixed reality may happen to mean in the next few years. I mean, what I really mean is augmented reality, mixed reality, with headsets, whatever. I don't think anyone's quite nailed storytelling as such in those mediums, and I think there's definitely something there, and I think there's amazing use cases for AR, for MR, but no one has really told good narrative-driven experience, has created good narrative-driven experiences in MR and AR, and if someone could nail that, I'd bow down to them right now.
Yeah, okay, buy that one. Katie, last word.
Yeah, a little bit of that. I think definitely in terms of the writing, storytelling, and direction, the roles of those people within the space. I think to come out of it understanding, okay, this works well. This is good. This gives us user satisfaction. That would be really nice. But I think some of those. I worked in games marketing for years, and my job was always kind of trying to translate interactive experiences into linear media, and now I find myself doing the opposite thing and taking linear IP and trying to make them interactive. And I think it's just nailing that those moments of interaction you get in games where you just get that, this feels good, that the gaming satisfaction you get to get that to traditionalist BFI audience to understand the power of that, I think would be really good.
Fantastic. So to add to all the other things that we've asked, all you have to do is now redefine the entire language of film, make mixed reality work, and bewitch a traditionalist audience. So that's fantastic. So thanks very much to the panel. We are now going to have a very short coffee break. Then we're meeting upstairs in the blue room to get everybody to get to know each other and some rather structured networking. Thanks very much. Cheers. Thank you.